Welcome everyone to the Reejig Skills Masterclass. This is where we unbundle work one industry at a time. Today's session is all about the healthcare industry. It's one of the fastest growing sectors in the world and also probably one of the most important sectors in the world. It touches every one of us. It powers the economy, and it is probably, the most transformational when it comes to the potential of AI. I'm Siobhan Savage, the CEO of Reejig, and I'm joined by Mike Reed, who is our Chief Product Officer and also our in-house expert on all things work ontology. We're here to simplify the complexities of the healthcare industry. We're using data to help you unlock your workforce potential. So let's dive into what's happening right now and how we can build a bold and responsible workforce of the future for everyone in this space. So before we begin, I just want to give you an overview of really what we're going to cover today. We're going to focus on a little bit of the industry outlook itself. So like, what is happening? What is the leaders of the space actually saying? Then we're going to break down the work ontology itself, tell you what that is, what we can tell you about the industry. Then we're going to look at, well, where is the actual AI impact assessment? So when we've looked at our work ontology, what does it tell us? And then we're going to look at the reskilling strategy. So we want to make sure that we're being really bold and thinking about AI, but reskilling and making sure that folks have access to meaningful work. And then we'll cover off some practical actions that you can take to make sure that, this is time well spent that you can bring back into your workforce and really start, creating your own bold and responsible workforce. So the industry, the global healthcare industry has been valued at around 12 trillion, and that was in 2022. And it's expected to reach 15 trillion by 2028. The healthcare space is at a turning point. It's driven by rising costs, workforce shortages, the increasing integration of AI to relieve some of that pressure. And in fact, the healthcare spend is due to grow by 5.4% year on year. Now, the focus is shifting toward creating more efficient AI-augmented workforces and workflows that allow healthcare professionals to focus on the patient care itself. So as you can see, we've got some really great data from the World Health Organization, from KPMG and some other key stats, but that is an incredible growth trajectory. And when you think about the size and scale and how this impacts everyone in the healthcare space and also in society, this is one of the most important industries that we're covering on our journey. And I personally am very passionate about this space. I find it to be one of the most complex workforce strategies because you're looking at so many different types of folks and different types of requirements of skills and tasks. So it really does bring out some really complex problems when it comes to AI adoption, but also critical talent, because this talent is, some of the most important talent in the world. So it's a really exciting session that we're doing today on the data. Part of what we wanted to do was make sure that we're actually taking, some insight into what the CEOs are saying. If anyone isn't doing this, some of the best things that we find for information is to read the earnings calls. So a lot of the earnings calls are publicly posted. It's really what the chief executive officer and usually chief financial officer are saying about where the business is at. And it really gives you insight into, if that's what the focus is for the organization that's being talked at an earnings call or in any public records, it really tells you where the workforce strategy is going to be. And the leaders in the healthcare space, they're all laser focused on three priorities right now: AI implementation, operational efficiency, and finding and retaining critical talent that they need to deliver their service lines. For example, as you can see, the Medibank CEO is saying they're using AI tools to automate routine tasks, free up time for skilled workers to focus on patient care. You're seeing similar from, the Roche CEO as well, that they're looking at this hybrid future where AI complements healthcare professionals, improving precision and care delivery, which I think is, incredible. These leaders are reimagining how the work is going to get done in healthcare, blending technologies with humans. And I think that's the part where, a lot of the focus that we're looking at is not about taking humans out. It's actually, how do we augment? How do we complement? How do we free those critical folks up to do the most meaningful part of their role so that we can actually, deliver the best care in the world? Some of the key words when we did our own little word cloud of analyzing not just these earnings calls and this insight from public data, but looking at, what everyone was saying in healthcare, not just in this region, but also globally: cost containment, critical talent, velocity. Velocity, I'm hearing a lot in the market right now as well. because it's not just about cutting costs, it's about the speed to customer or the speed to care. And I think that's really important, that when we're thinking about AI and we're thinking about this new workforce, it's not always about, reducing costs. It's actually, how do we make a much more faster, incredible service line, be it across all industries? And obviously AI implementation. Most folks in the healthcare space and the aged care space that I have seen have moved from, oh my God, AI, what is it? We don't know what's happening, to now, okay, we now understand the risks of this. How do I implement this? And how do I do it in a way that is going to be really surgical when it comes to the implementation and transformation, rather than just spraying and praying and buying technology? So, you can see here from the CEOs that they're all sort of leaning towards that path. And I'm sure everyone on the call is hearing within their workforces today a very similar conversation. Now, when we're thinking about, this new world of work, this is a completely different world. It's not the same. It requires a completely different operating model, which requires a very new workforce strategy. And, we're really passionate about making sure that we are using our data at Reejig to educate, to inspire, and to make sure that folks are not left behind. And what we believe is the best leaders in the world, the best companies in the world, will have a really bold and responsible workforce strategy. And that bold workforce strategy is really focused on, how do we make sure that you are reinventing your workforce in a way where you're adopting a new workforce strategy, which will include, digital workers, which includes flex workers, that thinks about your work in a completely different way. Because the way that we've been designing our workforces to date is not fit for purpose. It will not work in this new environment. So we're really going to have to be bold. And I think there is an opportunity for us that, I'm in my own company, I'm saving $1.6 million a month alone within my organization. And when you think about, I'm a smaller organization compared to folks here, the opportunity for you to free up capital in a way for you to focus that back into reprioritization. So for me, I get to move money into new areas because I'm saving that. We're seeing a lot of that. So we really want you as leaders on this call to be really bold, to not be afraid to use data to reinvent your workforce. While on the same hand, we want to make sure that you're really responsible. We do not want to be on the wrong side of history on this one. There will be, if we adopt AI, there will be folks that will be impacted. And our role as leaders is to make sure that we leave no one behind. So it is really important that when we think about this new world, that we're not just looking at this workforce in terms of what can we automate out and save money, that is actually looking at it from a bold and responsible world. And in this world, everybody wins. Everybody wins. Your organization is busier, you're serving customers, you're more productive, you'll likely make more money if you're in a profit line center, but also you're freeing your folks up to do the most meaningful part of their jobs and automating out the stuff that no one ever wants to do. And I think that's where it's really incredible opportunity for us to really, redesign our workforces and reinvent this new world of work. And this is something that I'm personally really passionate about as well. Hence why I'm taking the time and giving our data out to the market so that folks can start to use this and educate themselves on becoming really bold and responsible. Now, to become a really bold and responsible workforce, there's kind of three pillars in my mind around this. One, that reinvention of workforce. You need to understand your work at a deeper level, including tasks and skill. Skill is only one part of the puzzle. People have skills, work has tasks. And when you think about that, it is critically important that we are all understanding what is the work that's being done in the organization, not the jobs. It's like actually what happens below that surface in the business rather than in the HR team. And what are we looking at to understand, where the AI impacts are, where's the task duplication, where are the future requirements? So really thinking about that reinvention. And then we're looking at moving your work to workers. So once you've reinvented and think about this new world of work, how do you move work to workers? And that could be in the healthcare sector, whether it's, you're looking at using, nurses that are on maybe 3 shifts a week and they want to top up and do 2 more. How do we think about that orchestration of work to worker in a way that, the individuals get access to meaningful work, but also you're gaining productivity and velocity because you're able to mobilize your workforce in the right way. And then finally, it's really about that retention and reskilling. We want to create a culture of opportunity where we retain your most critical folks, and then we reskill any of the folks that have been impacted through any of your new world of work. And this is really important as we start to think about that future state. What is the impacts today and where are we going? And how do we make sure that we leave no one behind? From a sort of like cheat sheet perspective, some of the conversations I've been having, Mike, with folks, which was really about like, when we started to think about this in more detail, it was about the work ontology itself. It's like, how do we have enough data on the whole industry, on every industry, so that we can actually understand what is, you know, actually happening within the organization? Because the biggest problem that we have seen in our journey is not actually the quality of the people data, it's that no one knows what work is being done in the company. And that's when you think about any form of AI, or you think about any kind of strategic strategy or workforce planning or any analytics, you need good data. And if you don't understand what that data is and don't understand your work, it is a big problem. And what we've been kind of saying to our customers is, think about it. Jobs have tasks and works have tasks. AI automates tasks, not skills. Tasks need skills and people have skills. And this is where, when you're thinking about this in your workforce, this is a really important sort of cheat sheet for you to think about it when you're really starting to investigate how to design your workforce strategy. And I think it's really important because it really starts to help folks understand where the AI is automated. I mean, I spent time in my workforce looking at where would the highest potential for AI be, and I looked at it based on skills, and it wasn't great, because people have skills and the work has tasks. And actually, if you're automating anything, it's actually not the skill, it's the task. And when I switched over to focusing on the task, as you know, Mike, the data quality was much better, which led me then to, you know, running such an operationally efficient organization, which now means I'm able to invest in a lot more areas, which is exactly what everyone wants to achieve. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of break down the work ontology itself and really focus on, you know, we have built over 23 different work ontologies, and each industry has very specific ontologies. And Michael walk us through sort of really what that sort of looks like in terms of the data and the stories to tell. But before we do that, I wanted to kind of give you a little snapshot of, so when you're visualizing what a work ontology looks like, if you imagine that we have every single one of your jobs, we have broken them down into tasks and also into skills. And just be warned, this is dummy data. This is only for sharing. It's not no one was harmed in this process. But the whole purpose of what we're doing with the work ontology is every single one of your jobs, we know every industry, what are the jobs that are in those industries. And then we know all of the tasks that can be done within those jobs itself. And then we know the tasks and the skills that are required to do those tasks. So when you have that information, it is a really valuable information set, not only to power all of your workforce strategy and your workforce decision making, but also then you get the most incredible intelligence that you've never had before in your workforce. And this is where Michael really start to cover off a lot of those insights about what is the work actually telling us, and then what are the insights that we're gaining from a workforce intelligence perspective that really feed you to make those really important decisions on your own workforce. Now, what we can tell from that data is actually quite incredible. So when you're thinking about, bring it back to your CEOs and your leaders care about operational efficiency, they care about velocity, they care about costs, they care about critical talent, they care about making sure that they leave no one behind. They're all the kind of key factors that folks are really looking at right now. When we have that work ontology and we're able to see either by industry or by company, we can start to tell you where the AI potential index is for your organization. And that can be at an individual job level, or it can be at a job family level, or it could be at an organizational level. Or in this case, we're going to show you at an industry broad level, what are the AI potential index? And that is where AI has the highest potential for AI or automation or any form of technology impact. We then are able to look at sort of workforce bloat and task duplication. We see in a lot of companies, and even in my company, where a lot of folks are working on the exact same tasks in separate teams. So what you want to be able to do is to look at where are those task duplications and where have we created this bloated workforce? Because if you want to increase velocity and productivity within your organization and speed things up, you need to remove that bloat from your workforce. So understanding where the task duplication is incredibly important for really starting to think about sort of operational efficiency, speed, and also like no one wants to be sitting around and 50 people working on the same thing. You know, that no one wants to work in that world. We can also tell you the AI ROI and the timeline. So what is the cost of impact of AI and how long until we see the value? Frankly speaking, like some jobs and some tasks are not worth automating. Like they're just not. So you have to look at this based on what causes you the most pain as an organization, or what costs you the most? And that really should be, when you think about AI and AI implementation, that it just isn't because you've got a nice tool that you've seen. It should be really, from an organizational point of view, where is the best place for me to think about implementing AI? And it has to be based on cost or pain. Or that other one, which we're seeing coming up, which is the velocity. Can I get faster to my customers so I get a higher NPS or deliver a better service to my customer? In the healthcare space, I do think that that'll be something that folks will really care about, is speed to customer, or speed to patient in that moment, where can we serve them faster to increase our speed and time to value for the patients. And then finally, that reskilling requirement. So what are the most impacted jobs? A lot of people are talking about, we need to reskill for the future jobs. We need to do that. Like, practically speaking, not a lot of people know actually what the future jobs are. Like, a lot of smart people sent a lot of people down pathways to reskill, and they weren't correct because the technology, no one could have predicted it was that good. What we're saying is, look at where the impacts are on your today workforce so that you understand the impacts as you start to evolve your future landscape. So you're really thinking about it in two lenses. Where is the impact today, and where do we believe, if we change these jobs and really do evolve, where are they going to go next? So these are really the things that we can tell you about your workforce or your industry. And this is a lot about what Mike will walk you through now today as well. So Mike, I would love for you to really shape for us really what's the data telling us around the healthcare industry itself, and then I'd love to know a little bit more detail into specific roles, and if you can bring it to life for folks as well, that would be great.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Siobhan. And super excited to be running through this as well. This has been really interesting to pull apart, and there's a lot of themes, we could be following here. I think one of the things you did touch on the way through was the opportunity to increase the capacity of an individual. We'll talk here about how that can be enabled in the now and the near term through AI and automation. But the other thing was really visible in the work ontology was the opportunity from task duplication, where there are people in the direct healthcare side of this business who are face-to-face, the healthcare professionals who are spending time doing administration, when we're at the same time facing a real shortfall in that workforce. So how do we find more people in those roles where they're not available? How do we make the people who are currently available or getting qualified, how do we make them more effective and efficient? And that can be a technology solution, but that can also be an understanding more about the task that they are doing and who could be doing it. If I step back and look at the industry more broadly, there's a 60 to 65% of the workforce in healthcare is on that direct care side, is in nursing, is in allied health, is in physicians. So they are directly delivering the service to the patients. And then we've got about the 35-40% who are in those adjacent roles, the administration, diagnostics. There's another 5% not shown on here for health tech and health infrastructure, and the other supporting roles. So we're kind of looking at a workforce that's around 60% on the direct care side and around 40% on the supporting side. One of the challenges that's facing this alongside the current workforce shortfall is an aging population. So there's already significant expectation over the next time frame, next 3 to 5 years, that we're looking for a need of 20 to 30% increase in nursing, for example. So not only are we facing a shortfall today, we know that there is an increase in demand for these positions coming. So part of what I was focusing on here was how can we support the workforce that we have to deliver the things that they need to do. And in our ontology, we're looking at those as tasks. How can we deliver those more effectively? When we look at these kind of roles then and how it kind of lines up with technology, that we will be looking at kind of 3 lenses. The operational administration side, and that's not materially different from a lot of organizations. Then there's a diagnostic side, which is data heavy, and then there's going to be the direct care side. So then looking at some of the roles which have the highest impact from AI and automation, and thinking about them in those kind of themes. The fastest path is the path that's most universal, the operational, the administrative, the back office. The automations and opportunities from AI here as support are not significantly different than they are in a lot of different industries. So there's already a really mature space where they're developing process automation, developing tools and AI agents that are supporting those kind of administrative functions. They're the ones which have the fastest path to value, and also are probably the furthest away from that really rigorous medical trials regulation space, which is also going to be a barrier to introduction of AI into the health and the medical sphere. So in those kind of AI spaces, we see the kind of things we would expect to see. There's real opportunity for efficiencies around coding, around scheduling, around invoicing, and around management of patient data. The next kind of theme, as we saw, was the one around diagnostics. So lab roles, diagnostic roles. The couple of examples that came up here at the top of the pile were in radiology and pathology. These are already data-heavy roles. So they're really well placed to leverage some of those early AI platforms, which are consuming that data to support the diagnostic functions and rapidly get to assessments and insights to speed up the ability to turn around that patient care cycle. So that kind of diagnostic space is already maturing. It's not as broad as those kind of admin and operational functions, but it's definitely been an area of early focus just because of the amount of data that's available. And I mean, there's a number of vendors in that space that are moving really quickly to deliver value. The other one is the patient, the direct care, the patient monitoring, the telehealth. So this is how do we change the way our work is being delivered, particularly to an aging population, which is maybe not as accessible as they have been previously. And this is where we see that there is a huge opportunity, and this is the one that's most strongly aligned to the concerns around workforce availability. This is also the one that suffers most from concerns about cost containment. So this is the opportunity to leverage technology and support direct patient care introduces a lot of those platforms, which are now going to have to be subject to a much more rigorous approval and process, which is going to be a much higher capital cost, a much higher cost up front, and particularly when we're in an environment where cost containment is, and be able to deliver the service commercially is already a real pressure point. The support for AI and tasks around that kind of direct care is going to get to a tipping point where it has to happen, but recognizing that it is a huge cost impact up front. And this is not so much a task. Sorry, just to say, this is not so much a task thing, but this is a whole of business thing. This is a business decision about when we're going to transition to this new shape.
Even just one of the customers that we were working with on the nurses shortage. So when you think about understanding work at a task level, when we were looking at what are, like, let's say that the nurses have, one of the most critical roles, and they're so hard to find, and everyone globally has this shortage, right? And when we started breaking down the job of a nurse and what were all the tasks that we're doing, sure, we looked at it from an AI perspective, but the other part we looked at was like, well, probably 30% of that role doesn't need to be done by a qualified nurse. It could be done in a different way. And that could be through administration support or through a nursing clerk or, someone that wasn't qualified. And I think what was really interesting, and we can share this data after if anyone's interested, I can send over the analysis that we put together on specifically the critical nurses, et cetera, was that we could see, Mike, the role design itself, like if that was done in a different way, we could remove the skill shortage without having to, do it in, and actually recruit as aggressively as we were. So it's like really interesting that AI also can have an impact as well as that redesign, right? Like, I mean, you're on the same page as me on that, or how do you feel about that view?
Yeah, I think so. Task consolidation I kind of touched on is the other key theme, which hopefully would relieve some pressure in this kind of workforce shortage. And that, in order to deliver that, there's some tooling that's got to support it. It may not be AI, but there is some tooling that's going to allow us to take these tasks from the hands of the registered nurse or the healthcare professional who's on site and make that task available to somebody else to take off their plate and do. Mm-hmm. So our first estimates around this are seeing like a reasonable expectation of 30 to 37% of capacity released pretty quickly around that administrative support. So there is a real opportunity, without talking about AI and without getting into the details of the future possible, about restructuring those tasks so they can get consolidated up, and you get the efficiencies in of somebody who's taking all of this admin and now able to more efficiently deliver that rather than find time between all of the other direct care functions they've got to perform. So yeah, absolutely. There's this more than anything, more than any of the other industries we've looked at, has really the opportunity to leverage that task consolidation and thinking about work differently, without even having to get to what's possible in AI.
And that's why it's like that bold view, like you're kind of like boldly reinventing your workforce, and you got to have that courage to kind of start from day zero. And how would you do it with, with what you know today? How would you design your workforce? And you'll probably come out with a very different workforce strategy than what you have. And I think that kind of day zero thinking really needs to happen.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's initiatives around to support the increase in resources available in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
But in the scenario where we're anticipating requirements in excess of the ability to deliver. So if we're looking to grow by 20 to 30% over the next 3 to 5 years, we need to find a different way of structuring these roles. And that part of it's technology, but part of it, like as you're saying, and as I think the ontology tells us, part of it is understanding what that role needs to do and what could we be taking off their shoulder to deliver in other ways.
Yeah.
As I said, there's kind of the 3 key themes that we've seen here. One of them is the standard operational one, the diagnostic leverage of data, and then the potential of using AI and systems to deliver direct care. When we're looking at the quickest path to cost realization, it really sits in those first couple. It sits in 60% faster in using those data-rich sources around the diagnostics and lab work, using those to speed up both the throughput of processing, but also the quality and the reliability of processing. That takes a shift in the skill set to deliver that. But there is a real opportunity there to do that different, faster, and better. And those tools are maturing and available today, and also already in increasing use. The administrative one, the 30% saved, is leveraging opportunities that exist much more broadly. So in those spaces, operational tasks, administrative tasks, back office tasks that are not uncommon when compared to other industries as well. So we can see the same kind of tooling we would be looking at to improve the accounts management, improve scheduling and billing, improve the management of health data, patient data, are as applicable to the healthcare industry as others. So there's a real opportunity to look at that back of house process and how do we streamline those. In terms of finding the quickest path to cost realization, they'd be the first 2 that I'd be looking at based on what we've seen in the data.
And the purpose of these kind of like data snapshots is like, there's so much data, Mike, like this one had so much data, and it was like a bit of discipline to like, how do we give you like a snapshot of what's possible without overwhelming everyone on the call? So that's kind of where we focused.
Yeah, there's a million different things we can talk to here about improvements, but when we're looking at our key metrics, for example, the AI potential impact, that's really looking at a combination of things. So it looks at the cost of introducing a change. It looks at the impact of introducing the change. It also looks at the maturity of the change that we're proposing to move. So we're risk adjusting for the likelihood of being able to deliver this successfully and deliver the impact and the benefit that we want successfully. So as I said, there's a million really exciting initiatives that we could be looking at. But if we're looking at the ones which stand at the top, the diagnostic space and the administrative space were clearly the ones where I would be prioritizing first because of the anticipated bang for buck you get from investment there.
Yeah. And if anyone's on the call and wants to look at a specific, area or a job that we haven't covered, like, DM me or drop it in the chat, and we can get one of the team to send you over a little snapshot of what that looks like, so that you can actually see, because I know certain folks are focused on certain areas right now around transformation. So if there's anything that you're kind of keen to see, we can export it from our ontology and send it over to you so you can have a look as well.
Yeah, and I think when we looked at this, the themes that we heard from when we reviewed earning calls and listened to the concerns the CEOs had were really clear. There was the workforce capability, but there was also delivering on the healthcare outcomes in a way that was affordable and sustainable. So it was quality outcomes that society can afford when we need it, within the constraints that we've got. So it was more than any other commercial enterprise, the size of this market, but also the social impact of this market. It was really exciting to understand what's next and driving making sure that we can deliver impact, but understanding how we use that as part of prioritizing was key to the kind of the weightings that we had. This is kind of like a summary of the top 5 areas, and the 3 that I would focus on are the 3 that I touched on. It's the admin back office that everybody should be looking at, not just healthcare. Everybody should be looking at that. I think the other thing that forces this into focus in healthcare is, as we said, the opportunity to start in the task consolidation. So start at our constrained workforce and what can we take off their plates to make them more available. We've talked about AI augmented diagnostics in radiology, pathology, and other areas. We've talked about telemedicine, remote monitoring, and this isn't just the delivering of the service to patients in operation. This is also that skill set that we need now to set up the remote monitoring infrastructure, health infrastructure, and the elements of delivering this remotely are the high cost elements. They're the high compliance elements, the high regulation elements, but that is also the path that will deliver a sustainable future in this industry. The other ones around decision making and technology, as we know, this kind of also touches on how important cybersecurity and data are in the healthcare space. So privacy, security, compliance. I think the healthcare industry is one of the top 3 industries targeted for cyber attacks. So we already know how critical security around personal data is, around health data is. So these 2 at the bottom, that around the data, around the infrastructure, are as critical. So while they're in here for areas of AI implementation, that is really just to keep the lights on in your business. If you don't do this, then the business stops being sustainable because you cannot protect the data you have or manage it. Well, I feel like I've been yelling, but it's easy to get. It was easy to get passionate about that though as well. I mean, looking at it, it's a very different lens when you're looking at something that is such a critical part of the economy. Over 10% of the GDP is spent there. It's 15 trillion, as you said, in a couple of years. But also, it is foundational, like education and safety. It's foundational for society.
I agree. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg of what's possible in the data. So if anyone wants us to send us any specific rules or is interested in a certain area, like feel free to like DM us and we'll send you a couple of the examples of like what comes out of the ontology, and you'll get like that insights, because it's incredibly important. And one of the things that customers are using it right now, even like not current customers that are about to join, they're using it to really have that conversation with executives to talk about, really rethinking how we're looking at work. And I think, back to my original point, we all want to be really bold, but we all have the responsibility to be responsible. You do not want to be on the wrong side of history. You want to use your power for good and make sure that you are reskilling and ensuring that everyone has access to meaningful work. And what we need you to all create, and what the world needs from leaders today, is they need to be really bold, but then they need to turn their organizations into a skill building powerhouse. You need to turn into a machine that understands where the gaps are and where you're heading and where the impacts are. And then you're consistently and constantly reskilling your folks. You are making sure that you become this, and I love, this whole idea of like a workforce becoming a skill building powerhouse, because you are then essentially making sure that everyone has access to meaningful work. So while we're telling you that there's opportunity for efficiencies and AI, we also want to be really clear that we want you to make sure that when you're thinking like this, that you're also looking at what is the pivot. And one of the things we've always talked about is that every redundancy is an opportunity for a pivot. And how do we make sure that we give everyone access to meaningful work? And how do you think about weaving not only your implementation of AI strategy and your roadmap, but also your reskilling? All should happen hand in hand, because that is incredibly important. So like, I would love to understand what the data is telling us about where to next. So if we've taken the steps that you're saying to really be bold, what were the other things that we need to do to make sure that every single person has access to meaningful work?
Yep. So the first thing I'd say at the outset here is that decisions about reskilling here for the future in healthcare have to be tightly aligned with the strategic business decisions about where that capital investment is going to be. Because as I was saying, the cost around implementation for diagnostics, but particularly the cost around implementations of AI and automation to support remote health, telemedicine, that health infrastructure, they are not small. They are significant costs. They are upfront costs. So a skills pathway is taking the people we have today and getting them ready for those. And that has to be lined up with the direction that your business is taking. It has to be tightly aligned with how you're going to be investing, because that's the pathway, both for your business sustainability in the healthcare industry, but also for the value associated with the people who you currently have. The automation tools, I think we've talked about this a little bit, and that should be considered the BAU. You should already be thinking about that in supporting your back office and your admin functions. There is definitely a healthcare, there's definitely a medical lens over the top of this around scheduling and billing, around handling of health records and patient data. But that should already be in frame. This is the improvements around the cost of doing business. The other opportunities to reskill are really where we're looking at the toolkits that support, like AI, more as not as an advisor. So AI in a lot of industries is an advisor who helps everybody step up a level and do maybe their knowledge work quicker. But in healthcare, it was pretty obvious that the technology is a partner in delivering these services. So you're looking at those kind of skills which are helping work alongside the technology in that kind of partner space. So, for example, when we're looking at telemedicine, we're looking at those tools which are empowering remote patient management. And patient management, as I said, is not just the access to the data, but it's also setting up the infrastructure to understand the environment of the patient, like for monitoring the conditions that they're in, as well as enhanced patient care. So just capturing that data and being able then to use that data to create dynamic and responsive plans which talk to the individual scenario rather than a broader plan which is more generic. So making sure that we're finding those paths to bring the people who are currently in patient care and patient management and upskilling them in the toolkit that your organization is looking to implement to bring remote patient management or enhanced patient care to life in your infrastructure. So there's a number of tools that we can talk to, but those tools are specific to your environment. Taking those people who are currently doing the work in that kind of manual and direct fashion and giving them the skill set to work in this digital landscape is critical. In terms of the diagnostics, I think the opportunity there is to start thinking of those people who are working in that space as effectively a tool supervisor or a manager for the AI platforms, which are taking that data heavy environment and converting that into the recommendations and the plans. Medical imagery comes to mind as an example where the data available in that platform in that environment can quickly be assessed and recommendations come out. It's the ability then for the people who have traditionally been doing those assessments to start helping manage the tools that the AI platforms that are doing the assessments, the partners who are doing your assessments now. How do we train them? How do we manage the quality of them? How do we monitor their performance? So it is stepping up a level, but it's as part of now a new workforce. So that in that diagnostic space, the skills we're moving towards are much more of that understanding. How do we manage an AI partner rather than do the technical work? In the admin and the health IT, I think it really is those skills associated with increased digital literacy, and this is going to be universal. It's how do we introduce tools which are going to deliver automation? There's a few of them here. Automation tools which bring efficiencies around the standard processes and admin and back office, scheduling and billing. So I think in the operational side, the administrative side, it really is on that digital literacy. But on the diagnostics and on the patient care side, there's a real opportunity to bring that skill level up so that it's partnering with those tools that the organisation will have to invest in order, with a constrained workforce and an increasing demand around an ageing population, how are we going to deliver this service and make sure that it's available and sustainable and cost effective at the right level of quality. So that the skills are going to be linked to specific vendors and technologies, but it really is a different way of working.
I think what's really interesting about what you're saying, I mean, what I'm taking out of it anyway, is it's critically important before you kind of run towards the fire of reskilling or even the technology of where's the best place to implement AIs. First do that. Like where is it that we should think about the best place to deploy AI? And that has to be because it's going to make it better for patients. It's going to make things cheaper and make the business faster. And then based on that, you're going to know the sort of impact that's going to cause on your current workforce and the skills that they have. And it really becomes, given that new direction of where we're going to implement, do they need to reskill to be able to use the technologies? And also, has any folks being displaced? is there any actual full impacts or half impacts that we would see that people are actually probably going to need to pivot away from that? Because, you know, some of what you're saying is that we'll bring in new technologies to augment and make people faster, but in some other jobs there is genuine like areas that there's full displacement of an individual, and what we've got to do is figure out like where is the impact, and then know where to send sort of that reskilling. So that's really helpful. And again, if anyone wants any specific sort of roles looked at or areas, you know, this is such a big remit, let us know, because we can sort of pull out anything that we have in terms of that data. And I really think, like, you know, the key things to really think about is, one, you want to reinvent your workforce. So think about your work ontology becoming that live dynamic data set that is going to power all major decisions when it comes to your work and workforce. So job architectures, skills are only one part of the puzzle. You really need to have that full, deep understanding of the work that's being done if you're going to adopt any form of new way of working like AI. And then you want to be able to mobilize your workforce. And then you want to think about that reskilling. And it's an incredibly important thing, you know, when you're looking at where is the AI roadmap, so that you can start to look at that as well when you're going on this journey, because you don't want to overwhelm your workforce. You want to do this in a way where you're really looking at where is the highest potential areas. Now, we have sort of given this data as like a big data set from an industry. If anyone wants to get this for their workforce and they want to either host a session or get access to some of this data, we can do that free for you. We just need to know where you want us to focus so that we don't kind of spray and pray a whole pile of data. So if anyone here wants to look at, you know, that masterclass specific to your organization, please do let us know. We're happy to help. We want to use our data for good. So always love to help. And I think we've got some questions that have come in through the chat. So I'm just going to be reading them sort of off my desktop. So if you see me distracted, so really the questions are, what are the ethical, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen in 1 second, but what are the ethical considerations we should be taking into account when implementing AI in healthcare? I mean, I think from an ethical perspective, there's probably a few lenses that I would say before I hand to you, Mike. I would say one is there's ethical in terms of the AI use, and then there's ethical in terms of being good humans and doing the right thing. From an ethical AI perspective, you know, when you think about your workforce, you're touching some of the most sensitive data sets that you could potentially touch. You want to make sure that the AI that you're using has had independent audits to make sure that it is making good and fair decisions for you and you know, beside you. So that's going to be incredibly important to really think about, you know, that ethical component. What we have seen was why the delay, you know, AI launched really 18 months, 2 years ago, and you're starting to see now that the wave of folks running towards implementation. People took their time to really understand the risks, and the data privacy component and the ethical use of AI were pretty much the key factors. And then also, you know, AI operating on behalf of you and you not being human in the loop. That's something that's really important to consider. I think from a HR leader perspective and the folks that would be interested in this type of conversation, it's the ethical view of like not harvesting people out of jobs. You know, like that whole idea of like wanting to take people out of jobs just to save money, like that is not ethical. You want to be really bold and really responsible. So I would definitely say that that's important. Mike, from a tech perspective and more leaning into, you know, your world and product and technology, what would you say to answer that question?
Yeah, and I mean, I love to spend time talking about how we think about ethics in AI, particularly in the people space. And there's nothing unique in that. I mean, the regulations are growing. There's the US view and the Europe view. But I think when I'm thinking about healthcare as well, I think about ethics in terms of the delivery of technology on the task level, and that's a much more a much larger conversation. So, at what point is technology able to be deployed to deliver these services? So I think when we think about ethics in our platform, it's about the fair treatment of people and removing bias and making sure that we're able to, there's transparency to the decision making, the security around the data, and it's explainable. But when we think about it in a healthcare space, and that's the implementation of technologies to support healthcare, particularly frontline or diagnostics, I think ethics also introduce that. At what point is this technology ready? And this is, I guess, why I'm stressing that on that side of the conversation. So I've got the admin, we've got the diagnostics, and we've got the direct care. On the diagnostics and direct care, like we see a much larger capital investment that needs to support that compliance with regulation, and part of that is going to be the compliance with ethics. So we see that's why that's a much larger investment, which makes it a much bigger cost footprint, which makes it a much bigger business decision, which means that all of those things flow through. The admin and the diagnostics to some extent are becoming much more business as usual. So those questions should be answered in the technologies that serve those health purposes.
One of the other questions that comes in is like, what are some of the biggest challenges in adopting AI in healthcare, and how can organizations overcome them? I mean, I work with government customers, and I can tell you what I see is some of the biggest issues. And I also have worked on the private side as well. I think there is the where to start problem. You know, this is a very overwhelming, this is a completely new world that we're all suddenly expected to understand. You know, like no one really has been trained in AI. No one knows the impacts of AI. Even the people building AI don't know yet what AI is going to do, right? So when you think about it, we're all kind of figuring it out at the same time. So when you're thinking about your workforce and adopting it into organizations, part of the problem that folks are trying to figure out is like, how much impact will this actually give us, given the technology is still, you know, in its infancy when you think about it. And secondly, when you think about like the where, like most companies and CEOs that I'm talking to right now and chief people officers, they're telling me that people are running out the door and spending millions and millions of dollars on technology because each team has went and bought lots of different things, and no one actually knows how this feeds into their organization. Not only that, it's completely bogging down the cyber and privacy teams because they've got to, you know, sign off on all of these texts. And they haven't had an increase of their headcount, right? So what you have then is this kind of chaos in people buying tools that haven't been thought through, that are not being implemented into an actual workflow. And I think that's probably where our take would be: stop. Everybody stop for a second. And let's get really clear on where is even worth implementing AI to first. Like seriously, like some jobs are just, what's the point? The cost and realization is not even worth it. So focus on the most sort of pain. So back to that nurses issue, like if there is a critical shortage of nurses, like let's have a look at what's actually being done at a task level and think about redesigning the opportunity there, because that would not only change financially the impacts, but also like imagine the patient care that we would be able to offer, and suddenly there wouldn't be this you know, skill shortage. And I think, you know, they're kind of some of the parts where I think folks are pretty overwhelmed in terms of, you know, what's possible in the industry. And then, you know, like other things, like when you start deploying this into the hands of your employee and you start to think about reskilling, there is the change management factor, which really does scare folks. It's like, especially in the deskless workforce, where these folks are not sitting at a computer, they are out, you know, whether this is, you know, doing house visits or in hospitals or in areas that they're not allowed technology because of, you know, their actual environment, the technology that's being used in proximity to them. So there are so many things that are so much more complex, which is why I love this space, is that this area is very complicated in terms of then thinking about the change and transformation. And then I think the way to overcome a lot of these things is to slow it down and think about it in terms of not overwhelming the workforce, look at the data, use the data to make good and informed decisions, and then start to move in terms of like the areas of most pain, and then start to grow and land and expand that way of thinking of your transformation. So you're making sure that you're looking at the AI impacts at the same time as reskilling, because that's really where it's going to look as well. There was another question as well. What do teams need to do? What teams do we need to get involved from day one? So I think there is the folks like us who need to be the change agents. So you've got to understand this first and foremost, hence why we're running these sessions. It's like, okay, let's get the data, let's understand what's possible. And then what you need to do is then start working within the groups that have the highest other level of influence, but then also could be your blockers. So privacy and security, I would involve from day zero. Like once you're thinking about this, I would really start to make friends with them and start to talk about it so that you're making sure that they're in the loop, because they can, you know, be blockers or be incredible assistants through this whole process. where we've watched a lot of folks probably not go so well is when they haven't linked it to the overall business strategy. Hence why, like, looking at what is the core strategy of the leadership team and the CEO, or what is actually being promised to the markets, because that's actually what's going to get money and time and where the business really is focused. So, you know, really getting in the loop. The other thing I would say, and without being cheeky, but like, HR doesn't own work. Work sits within the business. And what we find is that, and I'm a HR person, so I can say this, like, my whole career, I've tried to create a language of jobs to make sense with the business, but it never really resonated. You need that one common language of work that resonates with the business. And if you're not describing it in the same way that they do, you already know you've got a problem and a disconnect. So I really do think that that's going to be incredibly important as well. Mike, anyone I left out in terms of teams from day one?
Yeah, no, I would have gone with the same path. When we're talking about introducing technology, it has to start with privacy and security, because that'll be a blocker if it's not at the end, at the start. But most critical is the business, and particularly in healthcare, because what we're looking to do is to transition the way we're delivering outcomes. And while, if we're having a conversation about who do we need today and what skills do we need today, we're solving a today question, but that's not moving the conversation forward to deliver an environment where we need to be able to do more with less people. We need to deliver more value, more quality outcomes with higher regularity with less people. And that's the conversation that we have to have, rather than the business telling the HR team or the HR team telling the business who they have. That's something that to work together. How do I take who I have now and make this the team to deliver in the future? And that's a coordinated and collaborative conversation.
We've got time for one more question. So after you break down tasks to skills, how would you assess them for competency levels across roles? Mike, that one sounds like a you question.
Yeah, that's a really good question around competency, particularly in healthcare. I think we do look at a lot of those credentialed elements of the role. We have in our model estimations of proficiency for skills at each level of qualification. But that's something that we like to tie in with assessments and demonstrations on the ground, because I know it's different to working in technology or working in finance, where you've got a qualification but then you learn on the job. I think there's a large part of credentialing here. So I think that's something that we want to work closely with our customers, because the verification and the assessment of skills competency, skills proficiency is something that we can suggest based on what we see in our models. But we also want to make sure it lines up with the experience of the workforce that our customers have.
Yeah, and I think the realization that we had when we started thinking about it is, like, work has tasks, and then you require skills to complete the tasks, rather than like just a job title with inferred skills, which is kind of what sort of is common in the market right now. That doesn't work very well. Like, you actually need to know what skills do I need to complete a task. And in certain tasks we look at, you can have 5 skills needed to complete one task. So it's a lot more sort of complex when we think about that. And then you've got the proficiency levels that are required for each level of the competency as well. And then you've got the human skills. So yes, there's lots. We should run a session on skills specifically for the healthcare space.
Yeah, I was going to say that the jobs have tasks need skills, people have skills, tasks get automated. That's an awesome summary for a presentation. But when we think about it deeply, there's also the domain that task is being executed in, the region that's being executed in, the stage of the life cycle is being executed in, the level of the area of expertise, the specifics around the function. There's a lot more to a task and a skill than just those 4 key points. But that's the critical learning that changes the way people think. But yeah, thinking about skills and proficiencies, the domain that it's in, the level of expertise, the experience, the life cycle stage, there's a whole lot of other factors to this equation that are relevant in operations.
Yeah. And what I would say, there has never been a more important time for what we are all doing as leaders, especially in the workforce and the people and planning space. We have a crazy task ahead of us to navigate this new world of work. I'm personally really excited about it. So if I can help anyone while they're trying to figure this space out, like, let me know. We're happy to share our data. So if anyone wants to get their own ontologies or have a look at what those pathing looks like, or you want to book in a masterclass, I'll try myself. I'm moving to New York next Thursday officially, so I'll try my best to do any for this time zone, but we also have incredible workforce strategists in the team. Thank you to everyone for joining. Really, really genuinely grateful for the opportunity to get to use our data for good, and hope you'll join us on the journey of really bringing this to life. We're also focused on the manufacturing space in the next 2 weeks, so we look forward to seeing you all there, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.